I got the recording started. Can you hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. There we go. Fantastic. Well, we will we will continue our journey into the temple and just look at some real weightier matters. I noticed somebody had mentioned here. Somebody was asking about the palm tree and things like that. Indeed, we're addressing that as a part of the final part of this whole process. They may not represent what you think. Again, there's revelation in all of this that's going to directly relate to, hopefully in a very practical way for us to view our journey the way I think Elohim wanted us to, and the way He depicted it. From the miracle of Messiah, through to the words of the prophets and Torah, there's this great relationship to our journey in this plan of redemption that is directly related to the euphemism of us as the trees and a part of this journey. So, very interesting. But yeah, we'll look at some really neat things as a part of our gathering next week in relationship to all of this to finish up the series. There's just way too much to try and bring in. It's funny when when I'm doing a series like this, you're honestly my struggle every time generally on the preparation day into the start of the Sabbath, and I'm reviewing some of these things. And one of the things is what do you throw out of the boat? what kids don't get to stay, because if not, you end up with a 7-part series, or every teaching is 2 hours plus, and even then you cannot do justice, especially in guarding matters of the temple, because we're just referring on the tree aspect of it. Matters of the temple are so deep and meaningful in so many various perspectives and angles and ways. I just can't do justice to what was laid out in the wilderness of the tabernacle, and then of course reflected in Solomon's great work to Elohim. And what that all means is, and it's not the purpose of it, but there is this beautiful picture that we're going to see the trees play a part of, and that we can focus on. But it's just, there's just so much that's in this that it's staggering. So how do you take all that and make it into a practical way that we can understand this and go, what's the simplicity that is found in Messiah and all of this, and still enjoy some of those hidden revelations along the way? So that's the challenge. And like I say, we'll finish up next week with hopefully something that is going to fill you with joy and help you on your journey. I know it did me. Okay. So let's bring on Samuel. Shabbat shalom, brother Samuel. Can you hear me?
Shabbat shalom, Elder. How are you?
Hey, how are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well.
It looks like it's down to just you and I.
Well, it seems that way. I think you probably scared some people with the depth of your teaching. By no means is this milk. This is meat. There's a lot to chew on. And there's a particular piece of Grizzle that I'm presenting to you today, with an aspect of something that you dropped, a very challenging scripture that I want to get your insight on, brother.
Sure. Don't know if I'll be able to help you, but I'll try.
Elder, you're underselling your understanding. And I appreciate the humility, but I believe the Rock may have an answer for us. You touched on something that in your teaching with respect to what Paul shared, with our bodies being temples, not belonging to us, but for the indwelling of the Ruach HaKodesh. And from a practical standpoint, I'm looking for understanding in terms of how does that apply to us on a day-to-day basis with respect to how we treat ourselves, and the things that outside of those things that we know are, let's say, clean,
Yeah.
and some things that may be considered questionable. So I wanted to get your insight on that in order to open up my understanding, so I can strengthen my walk on the way. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, don't go anywhere, Samuel. Keep your mic on. We don't have a rush on this, but again, that's so related to the practical part of this journey. Samuel, along the way in your journey, have you ever struggled with matters as you're learning the faith? Have you ever, you struggle with matters of maybe, I don't know, challenges that we faced in life, or just things of the flesh that, constantly want to draw us back into the world, or whatever else it is, as a part of the journey. And then there comes a point in your walk, because it's such a practical question, where suddenly that struggle or that matter is now left. It's overcome. And when you tried to deal with it in your own strength, it persistently choked you out until it was actually a true work that was done as a part of your walk. Because I think this is the practical thing, because along the way, we're a work in progress, and we have a choice to make. It's whether we become the fig leaves, we hide behind our knowledge, so those religious fig leaves together hide our nakedness and our shame, and pretend that, this knowledge of the tree and good and evil hasn't impacted us, and we present a whitewashed tomb. Or we actually go down the way of, okay, I need some pruning, some nurturing, some watering. I need to allow him to do this work in my life, because we're going to talk about this next week. Your question is a great segue into next week, because these matters are a portion of where we sat in our journey, but we can arrive at a place where we overcome. And the question is, are we playing religion? Fake it till we make it? Or are we actually allowing the real process so that it actually is overcomes, and there's a true circumcision of the heart? And the religious journeys, the brambles, the sowing of the fig leaves, all of these sorts of things can actually prevent a process of overcoming. Again, which we'll touch on next week. And sometimes the consequences to our lives is when we're playing religion and fig trees, and we're using our supposed knowledge to hide our shame and actually not have a work done on us, and therefore not become a living sacrifice to enter into this intimate place with Elohim. Does any of that make sense?
It does. It does, Elder. And I can tell you right now, and this is speaking honestly, that the work continues in me. It's a very painful process, and I'm not ready to raise my hand and to say that I have encountered something that I have yet fully overcome, that I know is an impediment in my walk. But what I'm starting to make peace with is the patience necessary to allow the Ruach to do the work that it needs to do in refining me. So that's how I will respond to your question, but I understand it quite well.
Yeah. It's a funny thing, but you notice that the crushing that allows some light to come into our life, and this great symbology of the journey, and that we may enter into the cultivating of this fig tree. If there wasn't a need to allow the fruit to develop and to grow over those 3 years, if there wasn't a need for the pruning, then we would be pretending that all of this wasn't necessary in our lives, and most certainly the crushing that came before it. Do you see, if we, and this is what I believe Yeshua is really relating to with, the whitewashed tombs and things like this of religion, the fig leaves, if you will, of religion, where we don't want to have a walk where brothers and sisters are close enough to us that they understand that we're not all so wonderful. We're not all perfect. There are matters we need to overcome, matters of the flesh, matters spiritually, matters emotionally, mentally. These are all things healing to happen in our lives. And there's real hurt and real things that have happened to us. And what we're seeing in this picture is that he's saying, allow the pruning. This will become more meaningful, as we go into the holy place, because there is a sweet fragrance that is going before Elohim. And I greatly believe that the fig tree is not a coincidence that it's one of the most beautiful smelling woods. It actually could represent the pruning of our lives and why it's a sweet fragrance, not just that it is, but why that it is. I know that the pruning in my life, albeit it hurts when he's doing it, the sweet fragrance of overcoming comes into the picture. Again, we're getting a bit into next week's teaching, but there's some incredible typologies here that are sitting inside this holy place, and for which Paul is alluding to that we are the temple. So is this actually occurring? There is the brambles and the sowing of fig tree in religion where we can actually not experience this. And therefore, our walk is not a sweet fragrance to him. We didn't bring any prunings to the temple. Can you hear that?
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, it's something serious. Your question in relationship to, I believe, what is a sweet fragrance to Elohim, and to think that the prunings of our lives are actually a sweet fragrance to him.
When you mention that, Elder, it sounds to me that, in relation to what you shared with the structure of the temple, that as you proceed, more and more is being stripped bare as you begin to proceed towards the Holy of the Holies. And once you make it there, for the most part, you are exposed. So you're back to the original condition of Adam and Hava. There's nothing that you can hide.
Well said. Well said.
So that's
my goodness.
And it also reminds me of something else that you shared in this teaching with respect to what Apostle Paul shared in terms of what we're building up and what the foundation is being made of. That burning, the searing of all those things that we think are important, the religiosity, the visual piety, as opposed to the pure faith that is going to be shown ultimately.
It is interesting. When Solomon's temple was raised, they had to do it stone by stone. They couldn't just burn this thing down. You see, it was built so strong, so incredible, that they couldn't burn the actual temple. And what's interesting, when we come in as a part of our journey in the weightier spiritual picture this is pointing to, our fruit is there or it isn't. This gets back to the judgment seat, that I talked about today, where what's left from this? We've brought our journey before this, and now we face the judgment seat. And what is interesting is, what is left from this whole process, this living sacrifice. Paul's trying to take it from the dead animals that were being sacrificed and that picture of that to now we're going to come as the living sacrifice, and we're going to see what's left. And one of the most precious things that are left from that living sacrifice of our life, I believe, is the most mentioned in the shadow picture temples, is the things that don't burn up. And so it's not about, we can't burn down the temple. It's a ridiculous concept, right? But what can be is your and I's walk is then tested before Messiah at the judgment seat. And what is left from that living sacrifice? Because there is a picture of the house and why this ruling and reigning that's to come and what's in there and what this is about is going to teach the nations, and it's going to heal the nations, and the Torah is going to go forth. But how is it going to go forth? And what way does this work? And so there's an incredible picture in this, shadow picture. Imagine imagine Solomon building the temple and going up to him and saying, Solomon, this is a nice shadow picture you're building.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? But here we, in hindsight, or that we can understand this now. But he might have even thought that was insulting to say. Or he was wise enough. I get it. I know. One thing's for sure. The Apostle Paul got it. And he knew. And he lived the bramble. He was the bramble. He was part of choking out the spiritual life and nourishment of the people of the house of Israel. And the realization that he brought as a master of Torah to now becoming a dead sacrifice to a living sacrifice, and what this all meant and what it all pointed to. Man, he is writing gems and revelations in there that if we don't understand it how he saw it, if we're just understanding it from our modern, almost 2,000 years Western perspective, we can miss how he was really speaking to this.
Hallelujah.
I know I did. And so when the Father brought these revelations to me, and some of the things that I'm sharing in this series, I've never shared with the body before, most certainly next week, some things I've never shared before. It's time. It's time for us to see it how he saw it, so that we can practically understand our journey, that it's not in vain, that the pruning, the crushing, the light, the whole purpose, the sweet smelling fragrances, the living sacrifice, it's so rich, Samuel. It's beyond comprehension what this instruction and layout that Elohim had constructed right through to guarding the covenant itself. And then on to a real eternal picture. It's so rich. I can't even near do justice to this. I'm trying to put a practical series together so that we can get, an anchor, a sense of what Paul saw, what Messiah referred to, what the whole Torah and the prophets laid out as the foundations for us to build on.
Elder, I'll say this, and I'll allow someone else to join in and to pose their question. But what you said is very powerful. I think, unfortunately, due to a lot of the dead theology that has accrued to us over the years, the lies that we inherited, that when you get to Torah roots and a lot of messianic congregations, and we're not even talking about Rome, and we're not talking about our brothers who are within Judaism, but those who think they're closer to the knowledge of the truth, they tend to misunderstand what Paul is saying. And they look at Paul as being lawless in terms of what he's sharing. But it's far from that.
Yeah.
It's so far from that. It's him getting to the core of what Torah is all about, and then ultimately having it being written within us. Because if we're walking in the Spirit, what is the need of having anything written outside of us to remind us what's already in us and what's written on the fleshly tablets of our heart? So I'm glad you shared that insight, brother. That's an awesome insight, Elder.
We yeah, man, some of the, I can understand why Paul would be attacked by the bramble then and now. I'll just put it plainly what you're saying. Because he's talking the why and the meat of the milk and the what. And he can be, as they said almost 2,000 years ago, I know he can be hard to understand, but he's giving revelation, the meat of this for us to march forward on. And so you're right. The bramble of the faith journeys, because they don't understand it, they'll attack it or even throw it out. And then eventually their Messiah will go with it. And some of the saddest things I see happening in some of these movements right now is they're losing Messiah.
Amen.
And
Elder, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate your answer.
brother, bless you. Okay.
Shabbat
Thank you for coming on and sharing. Thank you for helping me find an answer to your question. I'm not sure if I've missed anything here. If I have, well, we have another one. Brianne, are you raising your hand there? Well, yeah, you have to unmute yourself if you're asking a question. I'll try. We're having a little bit of a problem there. I'll try that. See if that helps. Maybe that'll help. Oh, well, the question couldn't come through there. We got Caitlin. Caitlin, I'll get you to unmute there. Can you hear me? Hello? What is it with the muting here today? I'll try this, Caitlin. See if... Does that help? Can you unmute now, Caitlin? Okay. No, that's not happening. All right, we'll try Kevin. Let's see if I can unmute here.
Is that working?
Ah, Aaron, praise you.
Yeah, it's actually me, not Kevin.
All right. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm good.
Shabbat shalom to you.
Shabbat shalom to you. I actually wasn't supposed to be here today. I usually go to our local fellowship, but it was canceled because of illness. And so I think that's just the way it was supposed to be.
You come and join us live. That's great. That's great.
I guess this is less of a question. I'd love your input on it. It's less of a question than kind of a confirmation of something that the Father was showing me this week. He woke me up a couple of mornings. Actually, he didn't wake me up. My 3-year-old woke me up, but he wouldn't let me go back to sleep. And I was laying there trying to go back to sleep and kind of spiraling in my mind and praying when I realized what I was doing. And he just said to me, stop savoring and start serving. And it was kind of like a smack awake. And I got up and came downstairs and he kind of led me on this journey in just trying to seek him and figure out, what it was that he was wanting me to hear. And through that, I sat there for about 3 hours, just going from this scripture and him kind of taking me to another place. And it finally ended me up in Leviticus 1. And that is the chapter about the ascending offerings. And it goes through the instructions if you bring a bull or a goat or a bird. And I ended up looking up those words for the entrails and the legs, because I've never really seen this before. Leviticus has always been like oh, it's just all these instructions. They're kind of boring. Let's speed through this.
No, there's quite a blueprint in there for us to discover.
Right. And so I read, you're to put the flesh and the pieces and the head and the fat, all of the flesh goes on the altar. And then it says the entrails and the legs. And I thought, well, I know what those things are, but I'll just look up the words anyways. And I was expecting the word for like organs or something for entrails. And it didn't actually say anything about that. It said the centermost part, like the seat of your thoughts and your desires. And the legs was the word for from the knee down to the ankle, the part that's used in bowing. And I just thought it was so interesting that it's giving us this picture of every single part went on the altar. So your flesh went on there and it was burned, but also your worship and your thoughts and your desires and those things that come, from what he's put in you. And then when you look at what the savor is, smelling was related to discernment. And he's the one who judges our thoughts and the intents of our hearts. And whether we become in that living sacrifice and putting all of ourselves out there for him, whether that is actually sweetness to him or bitterness.
Yeah.
When you read on, it talks about not putting honey or, I don't have that part written down, but honey or leaven on the altar with your offerings. And they produced when those were burnt. Putting sweetness on the altar actually resulted in a bitter savor, a bitter smell.
Yeah, you're trying to pretty this up. That's a whole other aspect of the temple journey. Like I say, we're dealing with the trees.
Yeah. Well, I guess I kind of veered from that. When Samuel was talking with you, it just was bringing me back to all of this.
Yeah.
In the offerings and being that living sacrifice.
Yeah. When we take it to the living sacrifice stage, and how Paul was relating to it, it's interesting because we don't think of that altar of sacrifice. It's how literally Paul was saying in relationship. Now think of this as a living sacrifice. It's going to get burnt up. We're heading for the Bema Seat of Messiah. And as a part of that, our journey will expose and what will be left from it. We can't fake this. And there's either going to be something left because hay and stubble doesn't survive that process.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. It really is. But honestly, like I say, the whole temple journey and the blueprint has so many of these beautiful pictures wrapped up into it. But you know what? Most people, honestly, they do not understand it from actually this great component of how his creation of the trees is all actually brought into this. It's not shared and taught. And I don't know why, because it appears to me that, from Messiah's miracle to just the reference from the Psalms to the prophets to the Torah to the actual creation picture for us to view and learn from, and then our reference in how everything in the temple is assembled around these. I don't know why it's not shared more widely. And I just had gotten to a point where it's like, oh, that's it. We're going to look at this because it's the journey into the temple and what's actually in the temple itself. It's prominent. The trees are the most prominent position in how it relates to something inside that temple than anything else. And there's no coincidence to this. In fact, it's of the weightiest matters of our journey, in my opinion. And it's, there's an incredible thing that is going on when we enter into the holy place. The sacrifice and the washing and our journey there was all outside it.
Yeah.
So we're going into something now. And boy, oh boy, does it involve what we've been discussing in this series. So there's things for us to see. If we have eyes to see, ears to hear, right, and to hear. But I'm with you. Like the blueprint on all of this, like I say again, the various aspects and perspectives of what this teaches us, if we then can understand it as a part of the faith journey and everything else, and then how that ultimate relates to us as His temple is it's astounding. You know, like, and so imagine if we've thrown this away. If we throw the foundation, or what are we building this on? And you look at so much of the, I don't want to pick on our Christian brothers and sisters, but they won't even look. They'll just make it up, and then therefore make him up in their own image. And then, you look at Judaism and a lot of what's happening in the Messianic and Hebrew roots movements, and it's like, you don't want to know the why. And if you don't ask the why, how are you going to know the giver of the what? Because He's done it for a reason. So, I don't know, but if somebody you love does something, and they have a reason for doing it, if you love them, aren't you interested in why? And so I often, I have to say to people, well, why did He do that? Not what did He do? Why did He lay down our faith this way? Why does He depict our journey this way? Like, why? And I just think Paul got to such a place where, like I say, it's such a level of understanding and a master of the Torah that, it was hard for people to follow him because they were so caught up in the bramble.
Yeah.
And I see it today. Everybody's brambling on. It's like,
well, it has to go beyond that surface level. Even the blueprint there, if we just look at the surface level, like the English that we're given, it doesn't portray that depth. You have to get into, they knew at that point the nuances of that language and what that would have represented. And we don't see that just looking at the surface of it.
Amen. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Erin.
Yeah.
And give your bridegroom a big hello and a Shabbat Shalom from me too, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I will.
Okay. Bless you. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, we're going to try this again. There we go.
Hey.
Are you there?
I'm here.
Hey.
Hi, Shabbat Shalom, Curtis.
Shabbat Shalom. We did it.
Yay. I know. I noticed my microphone was turned off, and that's why I couldn't unmute. So,
yeah, I was watching that. I was sitting there thinking, but then it happened to, who was it?
Caitlin.
Yeah, Caitlin. Yeah. So I'm going to get Caitlin to save her question for next week, and she can try again. We'll allow it. I'll try and give her a prominent position in the queue because I don't know what happened. Don't know what happened with Caitlin there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for taking my question. I don't know if I necessarily have a question at the end of the day, but I guess I do. So just a matter of whether I can, get it out in a constructive way. But so, yeah, I think just a little background. So I came into this faith basically from atheism. So it was, a big shift. And I think as part of the journey, so it's been 3 years for me now. As part of the journey, has really had me looking at, past trauma, emotional trauma, things like that, working through those types of issues, looking at coping mechanisms, those types of things, because those are, when things crop up, a lot of times we go to those coping mechanisms that we've used to help ourselves, get through things. And just going 41 years of my life, not knowing how to trust anybody else fully. It's definitely like been a journey to learn Yah's character and how to trust. And I think, where I'm at in my life right now is in an unequally yoked situation. So it almost feels like, and I don't know if this is going to come off the right way, but it almost feels like you walk with one foot in the faith and one foot in the world.
Yeah.
And that can be very exhausting, very overwhelming sometimes. And so as Yah is going through the pruning, the fires, which in an unequally yoked situation can feel like a daily, task. It's hard not to get, and I know that, we make progress with the Ruach, speaks to us and shows us the path to take, and we make progress and we move forward and become closer with Yah. But at some point it is hard when you feel overwhelmed and exhausted by that process. And that fighting yourself, that looking in the mirror, that it just, it becomes so hard. It just becomes overwhelming. And it's just hard to, a sister told me, you just got to take the next step. You just got to take the next step forward. And it just, I just feel recently like almost paralyzed in a way. I don't know how to describe it, but, I'm at that kind of 3-year mark now on the journey, obviously reflecting on some of this discussion that the teaching and the discussion. And I just, was wondering if you had anything you could share on, that weariness, that feeling of like, okay, I just need to keep going, but I don't know how sometimes. And I'm being vulnerable here, but
I understand.
I know that there's probably some others that are feeling the same. And so I don't know if it could be helpful to anyone else, but
It is. Yeah. Let me just touch on that to help you. And in fact, you're being vulnerable, but without unnecessary details and all that kind of stuff. You've done it actually in quite a wise way. Let me encourage you with this. The situation that you're in and trying to journey your faith out and go through the cultivating of our faith and the journey of our faith in an unequally yoked situation is probably one of the hardest journeys that can be there, because not only are you going through it feeling alone sometimes, but there's the crushing side that's directly related to the pruning and the crushing of your own walk and whatnot. And then you don't have that who's closest to you to maybe even understand the why or to share in the burden in a way that you need, and that sort of thing. And so it can feel like, sometimes even though you're in that, you're in a marriage situation, that I'm alone, but understand that. And I think be encouraged with this, because the crushings that come from this kind of a journey, I would say your husband's going to get some good fruit from you if you continue to persevere in this. And Messiah inspects it, and your husband will be able to, as you cultivate, he'll be able to partake of the good fruit of your witness. This is the thing that I have seen really help a spouse. It can go either way. But again, I think that if you can really be in this process, the witness of the fruit your husband's partaking of, because you truly get what this is about, will be undeniable to him. What you don't want to be is brambling at him along the way. What you don't want to be, you see what I'm getting at? I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying that you can come through this and your husband will experience that good for, and that may be the absolute witness that he needs to see. And it is a very, very difficult task in the unequally yoked situation. But I will say this, some of the best fruit I have seen in the body has been someone in your position who has gone through that and then has seen the outcome of their fruit go to maybe their unbelieving spouse or unequally yoked spouse. And that became undeniable to them. And it actually helped them come into the faith. You see, instead of brambling at them, we became the witness, and then they partook of that fruit. And so there'll be nobody else other than your husband that will partake of the fruit of your journey in a more intimate way than him. And so be encouraged, because if you can stay in this and walk it and know that it's not in vain, it can have some of the most beautiful outcomes that I've ever seen. And some of the best fruit I've ever seen has actually come from people in your position. So be encouraged with that. All the Father's saying is you don't have to do it alone. This is why we do what we do with River Branch. There are other good women in the community to have fellowship with, to understand, to walk with, that you can connect into, and so that there is others in the community. Man, they would have heard you today and they would have gone, man, do I ever know where she's coming from? They know. And those are ones that can share in your burden, can uphold you, encourage you. Because if you can keep going in this place, it can be some of the best fruit I've ever seen with people in the body that I've witnessed. And you have one lucky husband if he's the recipient of that fruit. So even though it might seem, very difficult along the way, that's understating it. And maybe you can even seem lonely. You're not alone. He is with you. There is others that understand this, and allow the cultivation so that fruit comes forth, and that he may partake of it. Because if he's eating good fruit, the question's going to come, where's this coming from? Be encouraged. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I do have some amazing sisters in the fellowship. And it just, it is helpful sometimes to have, some male insight. So
yeah,
it's helpful, not having that. So
I have seen that a woman in your position. In fact, there'll be testimonies from some men in this community where their bride walked a path that they didn't, and they partook of that fruit, and it brought them into the house. And males were sometimes, like I say, I think sometimes we're not as sensitive to the Ruach, and the beauty of the woman's design is that in some ways they really are sensitive in ways that sometimes we're kind of thick-headed, and maybe we don't hear or see as in certain ways, in the sense of that woman's design. And so this becomes something to partake of. In fact, we need to see it. And so, your husband may need to see this in order to ask the questions. Because I don't know what his experience has been. I don't know where his faith is at. But I know what's out there in the wilderness, and I know how much bramble is out there. And there may be a reason why he is where he is. He's only has his view of God as best as he knows it. He only has his understanding of what this is as best he knows. And if somebody else doesn't show him what it actually really looks like, how is he going to know? And how?
Right.
And there'd be parts of me where I've heard people's husbands, and you listen to them, and you can't blame them for where they're at because they're actually telling the truth of what they've seen and witnessed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so.
Yes.
Some like a man sometimes has to, like I say, we just have to have it in our face to finally go, okay, you know, what I lived, what I experienced, what I saw, what I witnessed is not what I'm seeing and witnessing in my bride. So where is this coming from?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, be patient with us male designs. We're a little slow to the play sometimes.
Yeah, it is interesting seeing his journey because when we got married, you know, we're both coming from he has a Catholic background. He was born and raised and went through, you know, all the way through high school in a Catholic schooling and everything. And
wow. Okay.
Yeah.
You're answering some questions here.
Yeah. Then we both, well, he sort of became atheist. I don't know if that turned him onto that, but he didn't believe in God. But to see over the last year, he has told me he now believes in God, and it is the God of the Bible, but he's, in his words, just not as into it as I am. And to see him actually this past week, we had dinner with our 5-year-old and he prayed. And
wow.
Yeah, it was, you know, I don't know if he's, you know, where exactly he's at. He doesn't really like to talk about it and all that, but it has been definitely an interesting thing to see. And I don't ever really press anything. But just those few changes, it is interesting. And I honestly, I don't know exactly where his journey is leading, but it's, you know, it's definitely different than where we started from. So
let me leave you with this. Sounds like he's had enough Bramble in his life, so you don't want to be Bramble as well, right? So,
yeah.
But just with the little bit that you've given me, you know, to be honest with you, can you blame him?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this is the fruit he's had and the witness that he's had, and so, you know, praise Yah that he sent you to him, and I think if you keep going in this, he's gonna recognize that too. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, with what little you've given me, this is no surprise. Men are truly, sometimes we just go, well, why? Mm-hmm. Show me, you know, like we just, you know, it's like, I'm done with the excuses and the rubbish and all this kind of stuff. You know, you know, if this is the faith, then, you know, why is it the faith? And we have to see a witness. We really do. Like I say, we're designed differently. And like I say, there's a sensitivity that I think can sit with the woman's design to the Ruach. And men sometimes just need stuff right plonked in their face. And I can't think of anything more beautiful than a bride who's trying to honor the faith and go through this process than being any clear witness to a stubborn, you know, thick-headed position that actually has some justification. You know, honestly, if I was speaking to your husband, I'd say, look, I don't blame you. I completely understand it. Like, you know, and yeah, so, you know, praise Yah, he sent you to him. You know, I think the day will come where he'll say the same. There's testimony in this community that has this. So keep going. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I thank you so much for the encouragement and taking my question.
Okay. All right. Well, bless you.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful finish to your Sabbath.
Thank you as well.
Okay. Wow. All right, everyone. Your homework for the week. You shall not bramble on with each other. No brambling this week. Who's out? Hands up. Who's gonna not be the bramblers this week? All right. That's awesome. Oh, bless you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for everything. And yeah, let's continue on our journey and go into this place. And discover what other hidden little revelations the Father has for us with this journey. I'll finish up with the blessing. How's that? Let's finish up with the blessing. Yah will bless you and guard you. Yah will shine his countenance upon you and be gracious to you. Yah will turn his countenance towards you and grant you shalom. Everyone, may you have a blessed finish to your Sabbath, or if it's already finished, have a blessed week ahead of you. And everyone, we look forward to seeing you in the river next week, and we'll finish this journey. And then we got a special surprise for part 5 of the series. Wait till you see this. All right. Shabbat shalom, everyone.